Hey, Chargers fans, welcome into another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. Joining me as always are Tyler and Alex. Alex, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good. I went for a walk, did some studying, got into a fight with the official Chargers play-by-play guy on Twitter. Normal day.
Yeah, normal day for you, and unfortunately, Kevin Durant and James Harden are super soft, so you don't get your playoff game tonight.
Pitch made.
Tyler, how you doing today, man?
Dude, I'm so ready to be done with these position groups and stop talking about them. Like, I love this stuff until all of a sudden I hit a wall where it's like, God, can we just kill me, please?
Oh yeah. The nice thing about free agency is that it gives you that break for a couple weeks where, all right, now I get to go back and watch actual like NFL film, which is just so much cleaner and
Yeah.
and it's just such a easier evaluation than watching, South Carolina football fuck up zone coverages every single play.
Or watching a Northwestern guy that you think is a good run defender and then he grades like a 3.66 raw athletic score.
My guy Patty Fisher ran a slower 40-yard dash than Rashawn Slater, a 300-pound offensive tackle. So not great for him. But yeah, today we are going to cover our safeties and our linebackers. This is going to be our last position breakdown, and then in the coming weeks, we obviously have, when you guys are listening to this, it's going to be 2 weeks out from the draft. So the next couple episodes for us are going to be our release of our top 50. Each of us have created top 50 of prospects this year. We're going to do a whole episode on that and kind of breaking down who we have where. We're also going to talk about some quote unquote nightmare scenarios that we each have for the Chargers. Something that I kind of tweeted out yesterday and gave a little teaser for is going to be talked about, which is still kind of keeping me up at night, but that's okay. And then we're going to do our final mock draft. I'm just kidding. It's not actually keeping me up, but it's not a fun scenario. And then we'll do our final mock draft. And then, of course, we will be going live to cover the actual draft on Thursday, April 29th. So cannot wait for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully get some interviews in there as well as some other draft analysts, but we'll see about that. We wanted to start today with some Chargers actual news, right? Well, I guess you news depending on who you talk to, but Justin Herbert per Bet Online has the 7th best odds to win the 2021 MVP, which is honestly that's pretty good. That's pretty good numbers for a second-year player. So we kind of wanted to talk about that and maybe kind of outline his path to truly becoming, a legitimate MVP candidate. So Alex, what do you think here about Justin Herbert having the 7th best odds, tied with Russell Wilson for best odds to win the MVP next year?
I mean, it makes sense. He's coming off the Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign, has a new offensive coordinator. Everything should look cleaner. And as we know with the MVP award, rightfully or wrongfully, it is the who was the best quarterback that year award. There's no running backs who are going to get the award anymore because nobody runs the ball. And they're ultimately replaceable. So, you're not going to get an LT or Adrian Peterson kind of season anymore. God forbid a defender wins the award. So it's just going to be quarterbacks. And do I think Justin Herbert has a chance to ascend into the top 5? Sure. I don't know if I see him being better than Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, but also, Aaron Rodgers just won this year, and sometimes the NFL media voters just go, "Oh, I want a new guy to give the award to." It wouldn't shock me if that was Justin Herbert. I mean, it happens to LeBron every year in the NBA. So I would just say it's a pretty good odds. I would take 22-1. I wouldn't bet on Mahomes 5-1 or Rodgers, whatever he is, just because that's just so, you're not making any money there. So, I'm not encouraging gambling. This is for entertainment purposes only. But I would just say it's pretty good odds. And for him to be up there with Russell Wilson is really impressive. And maybe also states how bad Seattle's offensive situation is right now. But yeah, no, I think that he could definitely win MVP. Just depends on how he adapts to the new coaching staff, how he adapts to his new weapons. And I'm curious to see how it goes.
Could he win MVP? Sure. Like, I'm not. Should he be in the conversation next year? Perhaps it is possible. Some would argue that with a couple more, actually starting 16 games and having known he was going to play 16 games, And maybe he could have been in that conversation last year. But, like you said, they're looking for someone to give the award to that's different every year, sort of. He did win Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. And I think some people are going to think that, he won that thing last year. Like, let's find another guy this year, even for a different award. I just think he had so much like hype and so much, that he won the freaking award and had the greatest quarterback season in NFL history. And so I think people are just kind of like, yeah, we'll look for the other guy. Plus, Rodgers threw for 48 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And while I think Herbert's going to be more efficient, I just don't think he's going to be throwing like that much. And I think the defense should be better to the point where he's not having to throw for 48 touchdowns. If he does, great. If he does for 48 touchdowns, like they're making the Super Bowl probably. I just don't know if that's going to happen in year one with Staley, with new offensive line, new coaches, and everything. So could he be in the conversation? Sure. Will he win it? I don't know.
Well, the first thing that would have to happen for him to win it, right, is that the Chargers would have to be a legitimate contender. Like that's, so that obviously goes hand in hand. Like if the Chargers do end up winning 12, 13 games with the 17 game schedule, then I would assume at that point, Justin Herbert's in the MVP conversation. Like we said on the live show, there is a world in which the Chargers make the playoffs next year. It's just not the likely thing to happen. They have too many holes across the roster. And inevitably injuries are going to happen to some key players. That's just the reality of the NFL. So could it happen? Yeah. And if I were betting, like if I'm a betting man, I probably would take those odds. Like that's a good opportunity to make some money. I just don't know, like if I'm a Chargers fan and I see that and I'm like, oh man, like it's really cool. I just, like I said, like Alex said, I don't think it's going to happen, but it's definitely a cool thing to talk about. And it's honestly like the thing that I keep thinking about in terms of like the Chargers and their quarterbacks. The team hasn't done great, man, but going from Breeze to Rivers to Justin Herbert, man, like it's just insane kind of quarterback luck. And I'm just like so grateful that the Chargers are not in this kind of situation where they have to go get a quarterback or, they have a guy like, Cam Newton where they're just hoping that he can be okay. And then maybe they're going to trade up for Mac frickin' Jones. So just really grateful that the Chargers have Justin Herbert and a great bright spot for the future going forward.
I just want to say I saw a picture on Twitter, Kyle Shanahan looking at Justin Fields, and he had the sex eyes. That Mac Jones stuff is bullshit. He's taking Justin Fields, man.
It makes no sense to me.
What does that look like, Alex?
Just looking at him like really, like he wants a piece of it.
Yeah, can you do that? Is that a?
Can I do what?
Can you make the sex eyes for me?
I don't know, just like the. You could do that. I mean, look at the picture of him. You could go on Twitter and say, look at the picture of him looking at Justin Fields, and Justin Fields is like sweating. He has like a vein pulsating out of his head because he's running around everywhere. Like it looks like and McCorkle. All due respect to McCorkle. He just doesn't give off those same vibes to Kyle Shanahan, and Bill Belichick is grimacing looking at him. It just, I just saw a picture on it on Twitter and I can confirm that he's taking Justin Fields.
Okay.
If you're listening to the audio version of this, please go watch the video version so you can see that conversation happening. But in all seriousness, man, the Mac Jones thing to number 3 makes no damn sense to me. This league, this NFL has always preferred traits above everything else. Like this is the same league that took Paxton Lynch in the first round. And, even Tim Tebow was a freaking truck as a runner. Like at least that kind of made some sense. The fact that Mac Jones is getting like legitimate consideration for the 3rd overall pick is crazy to me. And not just the 3rd overall pick, they traded up to get him. If they wanted Mac Jones, they probably could have stuck at 12 and taken Mac Jones there. Like, it just makes no sense to me. And, we've talked a lot about the Shanahan offense and how easy it makes things for the quarterback. Why would you not want, like, the best possible version of the quarterback? And so, settling for Mac Jones and everybody's like, well, he's just like Kirk Cousins and Matt Ryan. It's like, and that's a good thing. Like, what is that conversation supposed to be about?
Yeah, I mean, like Kirk Cousins is fine, but the thing with Kirk Cousins, he was a 4th round pick.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And I'm not going to say Mac Jones should go in the 4th round. Like if you really want him in the 2nd or 3rd, or if you want him in the middle of the 1st, fine. But like a top 3 pick is someone, who has, elite athletic traits. Kirk Cousins was brought in because they weren't sure about RG3 because of his health. And, that went from there. He was a 4th round pick. So like, and I get it, it's different because Kirk Cousins played at Michigan State and Mac Jones plays at Alabama, and anyone who plays at Alabama is going to get that kind of attention. And he had a good season, but like, yeah, for me, he just doesn't have the athletic traits to warrant trading up. Now, if you want to take him, in the top 10 still, maybe there will be a team that does that. But I just never understood that. And they literally just had a quarterback who, was a physically limited passer. Like, I don't get why they would want another one of those guys.
I was just looking up the draft. I couldn't remember what the compensation was for Rivers, but the Chargers are having to get Drew Brees in the 2nd round, and then they take Eli, but then they get Rivers, and I think they got a couple of picks, and then Herbert for no picks. Like, that's a pretty impressive. Like, and the fact that the Niners would trade 3 first-round picks, well, 2 futures, I guess, for Mac Jones, where the Chargers, gets Brees in the 2nd, Rivers for some extra stuff, and Herbert for free. Like, it's wild. So I'm so thankful the Chargers have Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, if it was 2004, like maybe Mac Jones could be a top 10 pick, but like there's so many things that quarterbacks have to do now, and I just don't think he fits any of them.
No, and we've kind of all been skeptical of it actually being Mac Jones, and it just makes too much sense for them to take Justin Fields after Zach Wilson goes to the Jets. Granted, I think Justin Fields should go 2nd, but that's a different conversation. Yeah. So as this pertains to the Chargers, right, like it would be fantastic if Mac Jones were still on the board, or maybe even Trey Lance if Trey Lance falls. I doubt that's going to happen. But, Mac Jones being on the board at 13 gives the Chargers at least, an opportunity to call someone like Washington or Pittsburgh or Chicago and be like, hey, man, like you want to give us that extra 2nd round pick, and you can get Mac Jones. Like, so that would be a great outcome for the Chargers at this point. Obviously, unless Rashawn Slater is on the board, which I don't think he's going to be. Trading down is still my preferred option. We've had this conversation a bunch, but please do not take a wide receiver. Definitely prefer trading down over taking a wide receiver. So that's that conversation. We're going to get into these linebackers first, and then we're going to spend a little bit more time on the safeties, because I think, everybody kind of agrees that safety is a bit of a bigger need than the linebackers. And frankly, this safety class is really freaking good, and this linebacker class is not very good, in my opinion. Yeah. So we're going to spend some time on the linebackers again, kind of keeping the same formula that we have for the past couple of weeks. A guy that we are pounding the table for, a guy that we are selling on, and somebody that is a sleeper candidate. So Tyler, we'll kick it off with you. Which linebacker are you pounding the table for in this draft?
For the record, for everybody listening, me pounding the table for these linebackers doesn't mean that I want to take them at 13 or that I even think that they're worth like a top 25 pick.
This is just in general.
Yeah. So my pound the table guy would be Jamin Davis. I would not take him until the 2nd round for whatever team's going to take him. And, I'm not going to sit here and say he's a 1st round pick, but there's a lot to like about him at least as a run defender. I hate bringing up PFF, but he's their highest graded run defender in the SEC by almost like 20 points. He was 2nd in tackles, one of the 5 best missed tackle rates, 2nd in run stops in the SEC. He has incredible burst and length moving from sideline to sideline. Right. I do think he needs to grow into the position a little bit more and become more comfortable shedding blocks and working through traffic, but the attitude and the effort are definitely there. He also scored in the top 12 in RAS this offseason, right behind Patrick Surtain. So that kind of gives you an idea of how athletic this guy is. I don't know if he's a fit for the Chargers per se, and to be honest, they shouldn't be getting a round 2 linebacker, but hey, I do like him a lot.
I like Jamin Davis a lot too. And, there's a lot of love for him. It seems like among draft analysts, Daniel Jeremiah has him as like a top 20 player, I think, or maybe top 25. That's a little bit rich for my taste, but, he definitely fits the kind of modern linebacker that teams are looking for. The dude is an athletic freak. And I know pro day numbers are kind of inflated in general, but, him putting up that kind of RAS score is fantastic. So, Alex, who are you pounding the table for among this linebacker class?
I like Monty Rice out of Georgia a lot. He's probably a guy that's going to go in the 4th round, so you don't have to take him super high. You probably take him very closely to the beginning of day 3. I think he won the Butkus Award winner, was all SEC. as a linebacker. And what I really envision him doing is kind of being a Perriman replacement, because I think they need someone who's going to tackle and be an early down run defender, right? Like they really need depth more than anything else at the linebacker position. He's super instinctive, I think, as a tackler, has really good placement, can play a little bit of pass coverage too. And also he did play special teams at Georgia. So he has value there, combined with BJ Bello and, Kyler Fackrell and some of these other guys they've acquired. So I think that he would be a really good fit for the team, and you don't have to spend super high capital on him. Really, when I was looking at the linebackers, it was just like, who can replace one of the guys that we lost, right? And, if you can replace Denzel Perriman and you spend a 4th or 5th round pick, I think that that's really what I envision drafting a linebacker for the Chargers in this draft looking like.
Yeah, they'll have to add some depth to this room, right? Like they can't just enter into the offseason with, Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquill, and Kaiser White being their 3 primary linebackers. Like they'll have to add some depth. Obviously, with a base 3-4 front, you're not going to have as many inside linebackers as a 4-3 defense. Mm-hmm. So that will change some things, but they'll still have to add to the group. And Monty Rice, you turn on the game against Alabama, and this poor dude is being asked to cover Jalen Waddle on slot fades like all the freaking time. But he was doing pretty well, and he wasn't step for step with Waddle, but I mean he was a couple steps behind, even got a pass breakup on him, and so. I think Monty Rice is somebody that could come into the league and, kind of outkick his coverage. And I think he's got the athletic tools to really shine in certain schemes. And so I'm a big fan of his as well. So my guy here, we're going to have a couple of disagreements today. Jabril Cox is the player that I am pounding the table for. Jabril, of course, is a North Dakota State transfer to LSU, kind of speaking to his character there. You don't really see a whole lot of FCS guys transfer to the SEC. Frankly, they just kind of stay there and hope that kind of dominance, carries weight into the NFL. But he transferred up and he didn't have to do that. He was getting legitimate 3rd, 4th round buzz last year, and instead he went to LSU. So LSU obviously has a lot of talent, right? Like they have Jacoby Stevens, they had Derek Stingley last year there. I forget who's on their defensive line this year, but obviously Tyler Shelvin opted out. But there's a legitimate argument, in my opinion, that Jabril Cox was their best defensive player last year. I think Derek Stingley was a little banged up, so that kind of helps. But the thing to like with Jabril Cox, in my opinion, is that he is the best coverage linebacker in this class. Like, I don't think it's even close. I don't think anybody in this class can touch Jabril Cox's ability to cover tight ends, running backs, even some slot receivers. And so that's something that he really showed at the Senior Bowl, where I feel like he really kind of established himself as a top tier linebacker. He had no issues covering Trey McKitty, Noah Gray, whoever was there, he locked them down. And so I think that his ability to cover is going to carry a lot of weight in the NFL. Now, in terms of the physicality, right, like that obviously was the biggest difference for him. Going from the FCS to the SEC, he wasn't kind of making the same impact as a run defender that he was at North Dakota State. But I think he can certainly grow into that role as he grows stronger and becomes more accustomed to doing that. But worst case scenario for Jabril Cox is he can come in, be a coverage specialist, maybe serve as a potential kind of safety linebacker hybrid, because I think he absolutely has the athletic traits to do that. So I'm a big fan of Jabril Cox, and I feel like he's a very safe player. And to me, that's kind of the biggest thing in this linebacker class, because you have Micah Parsons, who, obviously there are the character issues, but he's kind of an edge linebacker hybrid. Same as Zaven Collins, who's also kind of an edge linebacker hybrid. Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa, I have it graded as a safety, so there's a little bit of overlap there. I feel like Jabril Cox is the safest linebacker in the class, and so he's who I am pounding the table for.
I think we almost agree. Like, I completely agree on what is good about him.
Yeah.
And I agree about what you don't think is as good about him, which is, the run defense and the tackling. I guess I just graded him a lot more harshly in that run defense.
Yeah.
To me, when they're talking about like quarterbacks and trucks versus trailers, I kind of feel like that sort of applies for linebackers as well, whether you want to be the guy who's trucking the guy in the run game or trailing and grabbing him as the guy's just getting past you. And I honestly hated almost every moment of watching the Alabama game for whatever reason. And I watched it again today, all 34 freaking minutes of that, all 22.
It's so long.
It's so long. And I watched my safety later was a 43-minute game. Anyway, he just looked like he was kind of just jogging, always trailing to make a tackle, never really hustling to get out in front, not really good at shedding blocks, and he likes to be just taken down the field on a ride, and then it compares to someone like Jamin Davis. Jamin Davis on 20 fewer run defense snaps, had 20 more tackles, 10 more run stops, but a missed tackle rate that was half of Jabril Cox. So for maybe it's just like a gut thing for me. Like I totally agree about what he does well in coverage. Like absolutely, there's nobody else in the draft, unless you're saying that Owusu Koromoa is a linebacker. There's nobody else in the draft at linebacker who can cover like him. Sorry, I haven't graded Parsons yet, so ignore that. I don't know, just like if I saw him more as a safety, I think I'd grade him a little bit better. But as a guy who's a linebacker who has to make these tackles and has to be something against the run, like I was not all that impressed. And to me, like if you watch Cox play Ole Miss and then go watch Jamin Davis play Ole Miss, it just looks like one guy wants to be there more than the other. So maybe it's just like a gut thing for me. I don't know, but that's just kind of how I feel about him. I don't hate him. Like I think he has like a 6 something for me, but I just wasn't as thrilled. I wouldn't pound the table for him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for him that will determine whether he kind of succeeds or fails at the NFL level is just does his processor improve? Like when he's got kind of looking at inside, making tackles, or kind of being patient, does that improve at the NFL level? And look, we just saw an example of someone who had a historic rookie season based on his mental processing improving. So, it's always possible for Jabril Cox. I would tend to like him a lot. I think I side more with Steven in this regard, but I do think there are things that need to be cleaned up on the inside for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, like when you're looking at like these tier 3 players at their position, like the goal is trying to find like at least an above average trait, right? And so Jabril Cox's coverage ability for me, it carries a lot of weight because that makes him a safe player, because at minimum, like you're getting somebody who can come in and be a cover guy, which definitely has value. So that's definitely something that we've had this kind of conversation with Craig about Milton Williams and things like that. You're just looking for 1 or 2 elite high level traits for this player to come in as a mid-round pick to be able to, kind of develop that player. So let's get to players that we're selling on. I'll start this one off with Ernest Jones from South Carolina. I actually like him. I think he is, a very strong run defender. I think he's one of the few linebackers in this class that will actually like go and take a block head on and like go make a physical run play. But he's so stiff and so not fluid in coverage. And so I don't know how much value he has in this modern NFL where everybody is being asked to cover. I think as a run defender and maybe as a special teams player, he can definitely carve out a role. Alex was kind of talking about this with Monty Rice. I think, Ernest Jones would bring a lot of value to the Chargers as a run defender. But Mel Kiper Jr. and Tom McShay had him as a 2nd round pick. I can't speak for where the Draft Network and Pro Football Network have him or Pro Football Focus, but apparently he's getting legitimate 2nd round buzz. And so that to me is why I'm selling him, because I do like him as a player, but taking a strictly run defender only linebacker in the 2nd round is not something I personally can get behind. So Ernest Jones, like him as a player, but I am selling his current value, at least based off of what Tom McShay and Mel Kiper are saying.
For me, I think it's Nick Bolton is kind of the guy that I'm selling of this class. Just mostly because of his evaluation and the fact that you would have to take him in the 2nd round. Based on a lot of mock drafts out there, kind of like Jamin Davis. And he's a lot worse than Jamin Davis, which is the problem.
He is,
his size isn't very good. I think he's like 6'0", 220 or something. Like he's kind of pretty small for a linebacker. He does have okay like run defense skills, but I actually think at the point of attack he's blocked pretty easily. And his tackling technique, he's always like, this always shows on film, he's like dragging guys down pretty frequently and not like wrapping up as a tackler, which is like, as a linebacker at the NFL level, you kind of like need to do that. So I do think he has good movement from sideline to sideline, but like a 2nd round pick. Also, this is just my general thesis on the draft for the Chargers, is just like I don't see the point of drafting a linebacker in the second round, like unless you're getting a Jamin Davis type guy, because they have all these other needs and you have 3 starting linebackers, right? What I think they should be looking for is what I talked about with Monty Rice, is depth, someone who can carve out a role. But to me, Nick Bolton in the second round, especially when you're already starting Kenneth Murray, who's a lot bigger at Mike, that's just, it would be a weird fit.
Yeah, his best attribute is definitely coming downhill as like a one gap penetrating Mike kind of linebacker.
Yep.
When he blitzes, he's really quick, but he's just sometimes just hesitant in the run game. When his instincts kick in, I think he's really quick to fly to the football. But otherwise, I don't really think there's a whole lot that he does super well. I personally thought he was almost like a Denzel Perryman type, but the Perryman made a lot more game-changing plays.
Yeah,
so even then.
It's just tough for me to look at Nick Bolton and be like, yeah, man, like this is somebody that I want on the Chargers. And like, that doesn't like heavily influence how I look at these players. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't like influence them at all. And so, somebody like a Nick Bolton, I think is going to be a good player for another team, but he's redundant, right? Like you don't need to take Nick Bolton because you have Drew Tranquill and Kenneth Murray and even Kaiser White who are going to play games. And that's the other thing here is like, we don't know how the Chargers are going to use linebackers under Brandon Staley, because the Rams hardly ever use any of their linebackers. It was always, they were in dime package, I think like 40% of their snaps last year. And because John Johnson could cover a lot of that role. And so obviously the Chargers have Derwin James. And so how the Chargers use linebackers is going to be very interesting. Obviously, I think they should add depth. I think if you're looking for like a starter linebacker, you probably have to wait until next year. Kind of wait until you see what Kaiser White and Drew Tranquill are able to do in the next year or two. So, Tyler, who are you selling stock on?
It was Jabril Cox, so we already covered this.
All right, that's true. There we go. All right, well, who is your sleeper then? We'll go there.
Yeah, look, I don't think Chaz Surratt's really a sleeper, considering you probably get him in like the third round, but I'll talk about him because I didn't watch a whole lot of day 3 linebackers. There are things to talk about that I really like about him. 6'2", 230,
Absolutely.
scored well in speed and agility, voted team captain, defensive MVP. What I love is that he was a former quarterback who got to college to play quarterback and then decided after a wrist injury to try his hand out at linebacker. And he tries out his hand at linebacker in his first year, makes 115 tackles and 6.5 sacks. Follows it up with another 91 tackles, another 6 sacks. So, this kid clearly has the juice to pick up, the game of football on either side. And I'd be very fascinated at the conversations he could have with Staley, because they were both college quarterbacks and then turned to the defense, although one coaches and another one plays. So he has a lot of untapped potential, and for him to pick up that position that quickly, I think is very interesting. And if he's there in round 3, it's a conversation worth having.
I agree with that. I think Chaz Surratt, it's so funny how like you have these 2 brothers, right? And his brother was like considered the better pro prospect last year, and now it's kind of flipped. I'd be interested in taking Chaz Surratt in the 3rd round as well. If he's there at pick 97 and that's the pick, great. I don't know if he'll last that long because again, he's one of these, very prototypical modern NFL linebackers, right? Because he can cover, he can play the run, he can do all these things. And this past season, he was able to rush the passer a little bit too. I mean, you put his hand in the dirt as a defensive end / outside linebacker. So I think he's a really versatile guy. And if the Chargers decided to add him, like I would understand, a guy like Brandon Staley wanting to add a player like him, especially with his quarterback background, like Tyler mentioned. So I think Alex might be frozen. Does he look frozen to you, Tyler?
Yeah, unless he's really in depth listening to what I'm saying.
He's just pulling a Drax and trying to see if he's invisible.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we get Alex back here in a second. So I'll talk about my sleeper in the meantime. And that's Nick Niemann from Iowa. And, we were talking about Patty Fisher and his kind of lack of athleticism. And in general, that's kind of what you think about when you look at, a white linebacker from the Big Ten, right? Like everybody has these stereotypes of who is what. And so that's just kind of what you think about in the Big Ten, these slow white middle linebackers. But he actually plays weak side linebacker for the Hawkeyes. It's kind of a similar role to what the Sam and Otto role was for Kaiser White and Uchenna Nwosu before him. But the thing about Nick Niemann is his athletic traits are really off the charts. Obviously, like I said, the pro day numbers are a little inflated this year, but he tested in the 99th percentile for linebackers this year. So it's just kind of outrageous. You don't really see that kind of athletic profile at Iowa. And very similar to to Jabril Cox, he's not like a physical downhill linebacker. He's definitely more of a space and chase linebacker, somebody that's going to evade blockers and not run through them. But again, he's somebody that can cover really well. He did a lot of zone stuff, and he has great awareness and able to read the quarterback and the routes well. And I think, the biggest thing in terms of his draft stock is he didn't play a whole lot, right? Like Iowa ran a 4.25, didn't really put that weak side linebacker on the field very often. But this past season, he actually played a little bit of middle linebacker for them, actually led them in tackles, and I think helped his draft stock. So I think in terms of like a sleeper linebacker that could maybe be, a starter in a pinch and a special teams guy, I think Nick Niemann fits that profile. And because of his athletic traits, there is some upside and maybe he could become a consistent starter there. So Nick Niemann from Iowa is my sleeper. Alex is back now. So hopefully the internet is good. Alex, who is your sleeper linebacker here that you can talk about here?
I would go with Tony Fields from West Virginia, originally from Arizona. He went to or transferred to West Virginia, and he kind of became the starting Mike linebacker there fairly quickly. And there's just a lot of pop from him on tape, and you can just kind of see him use his length really well. He was a 4-year starter in college, 3,000 defensive snaps. He's just a really strong player. I think he's really explosive. And it's weird because I never see him get talked about in a lot of linebacker conversations in the draft. But for me, like if there's one guy the Chargers could take that I think would work really well in a Staley defense, particularly maybe not as an every down starter, but just as a chess piece to use, like I think it's kind of Tony Fields. He also is a special teams contributor, can come off and blitz. Like, I just think he's really, really solid. And I'm just surprised because someone sent me a mock draft with him, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And I was like, okay, I don't know who that is. And then when I started watching the tape, I'm like, okay, this guy's got something to him. I think he's just got a lot of quickness, explosiveness, and if they want to take him to be kind of that chess piece in the Staley's defense, like I said, he's really patient, I think, as a defender, and he also is really good at kind of reading the quarterback pretty well too. So if they want to take him, I don't know what round he's really going to go in because I haven't heard a lot of discussion about him. So I would guess like somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th. I'd be all for that.
Yeah, he's somebody that, I was talking with Ryan Dyrud on our live show on Saturday about him. The Rams definitely need a linebacker. And so, he was kind of saying that, a guy like Tony Fields would be somebody that they'd be interested in targeting. And it's like a 4th, 5th round pick. So I think that makes a lot of sense for the Rams or for the Chargers. Frankly, there's so much overlap now between the two teams. It's kind of ridiculous. Guys, any thoughts on any other linebackers before we move on to the safeties?
I just want to talk about Niemann for a second. I had no idea who he was, and I don't even think he's on TDN's draft board. Like I tried to draft him, and I don't think he's even on there. I totally pegged this guy wrong. Look, my sister dates a white guy from Iowa, and so I kind of figured I had that all figured out. And even in his draft evaluations that people wrote, it's like tough, hardworking, blue collar guy. It's like, oh, geez,
it's one of those guys. Yeah,
we know how this is going to go, but he's a lot better in coverage than I would have given him credit for.
100%.
So I'd be very interested to see, how he develops. I thought he was a little stiffer than his RAS score indicates, but what do I know? But good for him for being a true blue collar guy, but also being an athletic white guy.
An athletic white guy. There are some of us out there, contrary to popular belief, we do exist. Not me personally, just general we. All right, so we're going to move on to these safeties. I think this is a good conversation about linebackers, but we're going to move on now to these safeties. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with the safety conversation. Everybody knows who I'm going to choose for my pound the table guy. It's Richie Grant out of Central Florida. I think he's one of my favorite players, regardless of position in this class, because he can truly do it all. And I had some conversation with somebody who was like, well, he's not really that athletic. He ran a 4.5. And I'm like, well, you watch his tape and he does everything. He covers deep. He's got great ball skills. He covers in the box. He's a great physical tackler. He can get a little overzealous in the run game, but I think that's definitely correctable. And he can cover in this slot, and he did it very, very well for the UCF. I think they're the Golden Knights or something like that. Anyways, and then he went down to the Senior Bowl, and for good measure, played at outside cornerback and was easily the best defensive player in Mobile, in my opinion. And so he can truly do it all. I think he's somebody that, as a modern NFL safety that can, fill a variety of roles, I think he's a perfect fit. Everybody knows that I do not hand out comps, very often, because I don't think that it's fair to either side. But when I watched Richie Grant at UCF, I felt like I was watching how the Chiefs used Tyrann Mathieu as somebody who can play deep, somebody play in the box, somebody cover the slot, and play, dime linebacker in a pinch as well. So I think there is a definite role for Richie Grant on the Chargers as a team who's going to be looking for all these versatile defensive backs. I think Richie Grant is somebody that I would absolutely love the Chargers to get.
Yeah, he's a guy that I said this on Twitter. I don't have a first round grade on him, but that's unfair to him. Like, I kind of ignore my grades for this one. It just happened to shake out that way. But he's so good. Like, I really love watching Richie Grant play. The fact that he can do everything he can literally do everything. He'd be such a perfect fit in this defense. And I might even, like I said the same thing about Morig, I might also take Grant over Asante Samuel Jr. as well. The guy is so dynamic and so versatile and so good at everything that it's really hard to pass up on him.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go as far as taking them over corner, just because I think that is such kind of a huge need, and they sort of pigeonholed themselves into that position. Yeah. But I do think Richie Grant is a really outstanding athlete.
For shizzle. All right, so I'll move on to my pound the table love guy, and that's Trayvon Morig from TCU. I love this dude. They're basically, Grant and Morig are basically neck and neck for me. Yeah. For Morig, it's so hard to exploit this guy in coverage because he moves all over the defense. He handles anything you can throw at him. He was the Jim Thorpe Award winner for best defensive back last season, which Desmond King won a few years back. Previous winners include Deion Sanders, Charles Woodson, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Eric Berry. So, you win that award, you're not a bad defensive back. He can really cover everything. He's consistently making plays on the football. He's a downhill attacker. What I love is that he does everything like he did it in practice. Every rep looks so well conditioned and trained. I'm going up to make a play on the ball, wrap one arm around the guy in case he makes the catch, put the other arm in front. Sorry, I'm waving in front of the camera. Tight ends can't, they can't body him. They can't get in front of him. Speedy receivers can't really burn him deep. Whatever route they run, he's just kind of patient and takes everything so well. So it's that same calmness, but tight coverage, and then followed by a pass breakup on almost every target, it seems. So, him and Grant, I really like. I'd pound the table for either. Steven chose Grant, so I chose Morig.
Yeah, just real quick before we get to Alex's guy, I have a 6.95 grade on Richie Grant, and I have a 6.9 on Morig or however you say it. So I think both players are fantastic, and just kind of pushing back on the over the corner thing. I really liked the middle of this cornerback class. So to me, I would 100% take Richie Grant or Trayvon Morig in the second round if they're there. And then you can get a cornerback like a Paulson Adebo or Ifeatu Melifonwu in the third round. Just my opinion. I think that it's easier to find a legitimate cornerback one in the third round than it would be a safety. We're going to talk about some other guys in the safety class, but I do really think this is a deep cornerback class, and it's not really getting the credit it deserves. Alex, let's get to your pound the table safety. If Richie Grant were my guy, I think I'd probably pick him as well. So let's hear your conversation about Hamza Nasruddin.
I like him a lot. I think had he not, had the injuries he had and tore his ACL, I legitimately think this guy would be a first round pick. And you look at his career snaps before last year, he has the versatility, and he played, 250 snaps at linebacker prior to last year, 300 snaps at slot corner, 600 snaps free safety, 300 strong safety. Who does that remind you of? My draft crush last year, Isaiah Simmons. So that's kind of what I see when I look at him. I sort of see kind of like a baby Derwin James vibe to him, but he doesn't have quite the burst he used to, which is a little bit concerning, but still, I think he can be used as a Staley chess piece. Really great run defender and really great at diagnosing plays. I kind of see him as sort of I guess at this point, like a Jaquiski Tart in San Francisco. I think that would be sort of a good comp for him and what he would do in this defense immediately as a contributor. So, he's coming off that ACL, but, he came back this year to play, I think, 3 games at the end of the season. And I thought he looked really good. It felt like he hadn't missed a beat despite that injury. And you probably can get him in the 4th or 5th round, unfortunately because of the injuries. And, it's somewhat hypocritical because with some guys we talk about like, oh, well, this guy's not worth taking because of their injury history. And that's sort of how I feel about Caleb Farley right now, though the difference between, say, like a Caleb Farley is, you're taking him in the 1st round versus you're taking Nasser Al-Din in the 4th or 5th. So I just think he's really impressive, had a really great Senior Bowl. And I think he's going to kind of be a stud in the NFL. And I think he can, the worst case scenario with him is if you don't think he's agile enough, if you don't think he's moving quite as well, convert him to linebacker because he has the size to do that too. He's 6'4". So like, I think that could be an option for him too. I just think he's so versatile and can do so much that, if you can get him in the 4th or 5th round, to me, he's like the perfect Staley chess piece.
Yeah, him and Divine Diablo are kind of like the same player in my opinion. They're very physical, very similar physical profiles, similar attributes, similar kind of usage in college. So I think those two are interesting players to keep an eye on. All right, let's talk about some players that we are selling our stock on. Tyler, why don't you kick this one off first?
Cool. I'm selling on Damar Hamlin. I know that's going to be brought up in a little bit. They just have a couple of problems with him. The missed tackle rate is 16%, which is more than double of Richie Grant. I think he's a guy who tries to deliver hits more than wrap up and finish. He has a pretty average RAS score. He played 4 years of college football and was supposedly the highest rated defensive player coming out of the state of Pennsylvania. And he still hasn't reached that potential. Like I think TDN has him in like the 200s or something. And it's like, I don't like that. Like, you're supposed to be this great prospect and he had 4 seasons of college football and just, and he had 2 seasons where he missed time due to injury. He had 6 penalties last season, which is, Grant and Morik had 2 combined. So between the missed tackles, some injuries, not really reaching his potential, the penalties, I'm just selling him. Although I think, I don't know, you like him more than I do, but then I think I like Hamlin kind of where he's being projected to be drafted, which is like maybe like day 3. So
yeah,
maybe I'm not like selling him because I think right where he is kind of makes sense, but I don't like him as much as you.
Well, to me, I think he falls in the realm of a sleeper, right? Like, he's not somebody that I'm taking, in round 3. Like, if the Chargers take a cornerback in round 2, I'm not going to be like, all right, it's time for Damar Hamlin. Let's do it. So I think he's, a 5th, 6th round player. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I definitely want to see him clean up his tackling form. Him and Paris Ford, it was kind of infuriating to watch those two just, pretend that they were Cam Chancellor when they're really not. But I think what you like with Damar Hamlin is his ability as a cover safety. I think he diagnoses plays really well in zone coverage, and he's got really good ball skills, something that really flashed on tape, particularly against Miami and North Carolina. So like I said, I'm not taking him in like the 3rd, 4th round, but he is my sleeper pick because I think, if you're targeting somebody in the 5th, 6th round, I think Damar Hamlin makes a lot of sense. Alex, who is your sleeper?
My sleeper is going to be Tariq Thompson from San Diego State. He had 12 interceptions, I believe 35 pass breakup opportunities. He's a very willing tackler, and he doesn't quite have that prototypical size, who I'm going to talk about with the guy I'm selling. But I think he makes up for it with how he plays, sort of like Nasser Al-Din. I think you can sort of just use him as a chess piece, however you want to use him. And I think you can just get him and, he'll compete probably with Adderley for, whatever reps they get. It's just kind of a bolster the depth pick, but I think he's done enough at San Diego State to really prove, his versatility. And I think he could really, he's a really willing tackler. Like, that's the most important thing in the defense right now. And I think if you get one of those guys, particularly at the safety position, I just think that works out really well. And you could probably get him, sort of like Nasser Al-Din in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round.
Yeah, so that was my bad, getting a little overzealous on the sleeper conversation there. But I think that is a good pick there for a sleeper. I think him and Darren Hall. It was a lot of fun watching that San Diego State defense work, and I think both of those players would be definitely fit the sleeper bill. So I'll go back to my person that I'm selling stock on, and that's Trill Williams. I know he technically is listed as a cornerback, but really he kind of rotated as a slot corner and a safety. So I have him listed as a safety. I think he does fill a lot of roles. Like he did play and move around a lot, but he's kind of like that master of none player. Like he moves around, but he's not making like a strong impact. And it was just really tough for me. Like you watch Syracuse defense and you watch Andre Sisco making these great plays on the ball and being this super rangy free safety. And then you watch Ifeatu Melifonwu be this lockdown cornerback. And then Trill Williams is just kind of there. Like I think he's a fine player. I think, a lot of people on Chargers Twitter are a little too high for him, saying that they should take him in the third round, fourth round. I can't get to that point. I think he's much more of a developmental player. He's definitely got some athletic traits. But I'm selling the current stock on Trill Williams. I don't think that he is like an overly special player. I think he's more in like the solid range. And I just kind of disagree with that evaluation. So we'll go back to Alex. Alex, who's the player that you are selling stock on?
Man, people from Syracuse, New York are not going to like this episode because my guy I'm selling stock on is Andre Sisco, the safety. Look, I think he has really good size and athleticism. He's a ball hawk, and people will point out, he has 13 interceptions in 24 games. Like, I'm not really disputing any of that. But like, despite all of that, he does play, in a secondary that includes, two top 3-round picks, so you have to I know Steven posted a clip the other day that was like, oh, he got a pick, but that pick was created by Ifeatu. So it's like, there's a little bit of nuance to those numbers. But like the things that I see on tape with him, he gets faked out really easily. And I'm not just talking about by like the Trevor Lawrences of the world, because other than Trevor Lawrence and Sam Howell, a lot of the quarterbacks in the ACC are dookie water. So it's a little bit, just getting faked out all the time, and he bites really hard on coverage, and it really just doesn't look good when he's wrong. And I think a lot of these things are fixable, but something that I think is kind of a lagging trait of his is also tackling. Like, he is a guy that like single high, it's not too bad. But to me, he's the last guy like that I want as a run supporting safety. And I think that's a real problem for him. So I don't know. It's a tough evaluation because I just think he's really, out of all the prospects that I've sold or I bought stock on or whatever, he's just such a boomer bust guy. And for the second round, where the Chargers need to hit kind of a home run, and bolster the depth or get a guy who can start, I just think he's way too risky of a pick to make.
Yeah, I'm definitely not taking a second round pick on him. When we're looking at these safeties, I think, Tyler and I both have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah listed as a safety, but I think him, Richie Grant, Trayvon Moehrig, and maybe Javon Holland, you can make that argument. I think those four are so far and away better players at the safety position than really anyone else in the class. I think the gap between the tier 1 of the safety position and tier 2 is, in my opinion, bigger than any other group in this position, any other position group in this class. And so I think that's kind of why I want the Chargers to draft one of these safeties at 47, because they do need to draft a safety. Like, they're going to have to add more bodies into this position room, because if they play a lot of dime package like they did with the Rams, they're going to have 3 safeties on the field. And I would much rather take a Richie Grant, put him on the field, than Alohi Gilman or, somebody in the 5th, 6th round like DeMar Hamlin. So I think the Chargers will probably add a safety earlier than people think, just because I just think it's a premium player. Like, that's the difference for me in terms of like taking a cornerback in round 2 who probably is Asante Samuel Jr. or an Eric Stokes maybe, but you have Ifeatu Melifonwu, Paulson Adebo, all these other guys, all these other cornerbacks who in round 3 aren't that far away from Asante Samuel Jr. in my opinion. whereas the gap between the big three, big four safeties and the fifth safety is ginormous.
I'm
Yeah,
fascinated.
I don't know if they're going to take a guy in the second round, but I think the argument to them, taking a guy earlier than people expect is certainly the Staley positionless defense, right? Like just getting guys who can make tackles, make plays, and not really, caring about the position labels too much. I think that's definitely something that helps the stock of a Richie Grant or, some of the other guys that we've talked about.
And the only thing I was going to say is that's an interesting thought, Stephen. I had not thought about, the drop off being so steep. And that is kind of true. Like if I had to choose between, Grant or, reaching for like Hamlin in the third, I'll take Grant and take someone like a Debo in the third. No, I like that conversation. It's very interesting. I had not thought about that before, Stephen.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know, man. It's just, I think not enough people are kind of talking about this. I think, right now, Cameron Bynum I has listed as a safety, and he's right after Javon Holland. And that's a position conversion. Like he played cornerback in college, and he's switching to a different position. And then you have Hamza Nasruddin, who, like Alex said, comes with the injury baggage. I will say I think Jamar Johnson is probably like the one caveat here, where if the Chargers could get him at 77, I think that would make a lot of sense. But again, if he's that safety 5 and he's kind of jockeying with position with Javon Holland, maybe he goes earlier than people think. And so I just think that the safety position is being a little undervalued by Chargers fans, just because like they're going to have 3 safeties on the field more often than not. And I was having this conversation with Jason Reed about maybe drafting an edge rusher in the second round or the third round over a safety. And it's like, well, the edge rusher that you're drafting, unless it's a first round pick, is going to be playing like 10, 15 plays a game. You draft a third safety, that player is going to be on the field like 40, 45 snaps a game. And so you're not drafting a quote unquote starter, but you're drafting someone that's going to be on the field for 50% of the snaps and play a lot on special teams. And so I think it's a position that they probably will use one of their top 100 picks on. Granted, nobody knows what Tom Telesco is going to do. So this is just kind of me making an educated guess, right? But I think they should add one of these players to this position group just because they need the depth. I know Alex is higher on Nasir Adderley than the two of us are, but I don't know how much you can trust him. I'm certainly not trusting Alohi Gilman to play, 50 snaps a game. And as much as we all love Derwin, he hasn't been healthy. So to me, like, it makes a lot of sense, like, to add a safety in the second or third round. And at worst case, you have insurance, right? Like, you have a high quality player who you could plug into action in case, in the worst case scenario and break glass case of emergency type of thing. But I like the top of this safety class a lot, and I would be willing to spend a top 50 pick on one.
I'll tell you what they're going to do in the draft. They're going to take those top 4 picks. They're all going to be best player available wide receivers. I've confirmed this with Matt Money Smith. So, that's what it's going to be. But yeah, I think the thing about the safety class is they're all a lot rougher to watch, and just in terms of coverage or, what they're doing as tacklers, what they're doing kind of in the open field. Like I've criticized JC Horn as like being a, poor tackler, or, criticizing some of the situational things he does. But like, to me, the cornerbacks are a lot better, and I think a lot easier to fix the things they're bad at in this class than I think the safeties are. And that leads to a lot of boom or bust situations in the second, third rounds, like Andre Sisco, who I mentioned. Then, there's quite a few other guys that I think fit that mold, or, they blew up their ACL 4 times, and that's the baggage that you're taking the chance on. So, I really think it's just the safety class. It's a really weird one.
Also, the PFF dude saying that JC Horn isn't even a first round player, like,
garbage.
Yeah. Come on, man. Oh
yeah,
man,
that's ridiculous.
Like, I understand, Alex has Patrick Surtain. Some people still like Caleb Farley. I get that.
Sure.
Not saying that JC Horn is a first round pick. Like, that's some garbage, man. Like, that's just a terrible take.
Yeah, and like he, the whole like Justin Herbert, people got at him about that. Yeah. And then I had to quietly be like, I didn't really like Justin Herbert either. But then be like, yeah, let's pile on this guy.
Oh man, that was just, I don't know, man. PFF is hard
Yeah.
to follow, but I don't know. That's a different conversation. But JC Horn is an awesome player, and at worst cases, he's probably going to be like a top 20 pick. So, all right, guys. Any other thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
I don't really have too many thoughts, but I'm excited to do the big board episode definitely next week, or we're doing it this Sunday. And see how we all see the top 50. This is my first time doing a big board, so I kind of have like no idea what I'm doing. And I saw Tyler and Steven have these like grades, and this guy is a 6.456 and this guy is a 6.457, and therefore because this digit is in the thousands place, this guy's 31 and this guy's 32. I didn't really do that. I was just like, yeah, I like this guy, so I'm gonna put him at 31. So we'll see which one of us is right. I don't know who's gonna have the most top 50 picks. That would actually be a fun thing to look back on and see who did the best in their big board. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, this is my first time doing a big board as well, unless you count my like 5 quarterbacks last year as the big board. I did have Herbert rated higher, so I just want to point that out. So I did super well on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very excited. I was supposed to talk about a sleeper safety, and I don't want to because
sorry, Tyler. Man.
I know that's okay. I totally cheated because I was like, oh god, I'm running out of time. So I googled sleeper safeties in this draft. Said, okay. And so I got Christian Uphoff from Illinois State. I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'll watch Christian Uphoff from Illinois State. And then I watch him. I turn on the first game, and it's 43 minutes of all 22 versus like Northern Iowa. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? So
look,
he's good on special teams.
For a couple of reasons. This draft needs to just hurry up and get here.
Please.
I can't watch any more film. Look, I love you guys, but please stop sending me your shitty mock drafts. I love you guys so much for your support for the show. But please don't send me your mock drafts with Nick Bolton in the second round.
Oh man, it's that time. It is that 100% that time of year where you're just kind of burnt down from watching film. It's so funny to me. Like I went into this offseason and I was like, I'm just going to nail down like a top 100, feel really confident in that top 100. No, I have like 247 players graded right now.
Jeez,
so,
dude.
But it's okay. I mean, sometimes you love it. Sometimes you don't. When you watch the defensive tackle class, you just want to poke your eyes out. Other times you want to, you turn on some cornerback tape on Ifeatu Melifonwu and you're just all fired up. So kind of balances itself out.
Then you look at Ian Rappaport's Twitter and it's like, I've actually heard that Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver prospect since Jerry Rice.
Oh,
that's the season we're in.
Some of the narratives, man, like the whole baseball thing with Justin Fields yesterday, it was so stupid. Like, I just, it's exhausting at this point, and I cannot wait for it to be over, frankly. But I'm really excited about our conversation for the big board. As the only person who did do a big board last year, it's been very interesting to kind of look back and compare, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit on Sunday, but I'm really excited about that episode as well. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Tyler just did a breakdown on our YouTube page on Trayvon Moehrig or however you say it. So definitely go check that out. Alex also wrote an article for Bolt Beat about why the Chargers should not take a wide receiver. So definitely go check that out. And my 2 profiles this week on Alex Leatherwood and Joe Tryon should be coming out very shortly on LAFB. So please go give those a read. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.